In light of current events, I wanted to do a short educational video on how systemic racism is apparent in the real estate community. So stay tuned, I'm going to talk a little bit about race in real estate this week on the Clouse Corner. Hey everyone, in light of recent events, I wanted to take this opportunity to give a little bit of education about how systemic racism shows up in real estate throughout our history, and talk a little bit about the impact of that and what has happened, just to bring a little more awareness to what's going on, and a little bit about how we can maybe correct it. So first, let's start by going back a little bit. So in 1934, the National Housing Act was introduced, and this was to allow people with lower incomes to be able to purchase homes. By lower income, I don't mean low income people, I mean just people who might not have been able to afford it before. So it introduced things like the 30-year fixed mortgage, which brought payments on a monthly basis down quite a bit, so more people could afford to purchase homes. So that was in 1934. And then the Homeowners Loan Corporation, they created maps. And so what they did is they started to create maps of areas in cities, and they labeled them green, blue, yellow, and red. Green were the people who could afford more and were usually white collar workers, all the way down to red, which was determined to be the people who could not afford homes and were largely made up of black and brown people. And that's where the term redlining comes from. They were outlined in red, and these were redlined areas where people were not looked upon equally as other people based on their geographic location, their socioeconomic status, and their skin color. And so what redlining did was it made it very difficult and nearly impossible for people in those areas to buy a home at all or even refinance, because they were being discriminated against. So all of the suburbs with white people, where white people would move, had all of these covenants, which were basically restrictions that said black or brown people could not move into those neighborhoods, which was legal at that time in our history. And so people of color weren't able to move out of the red line areas, and so they were still stuck in a place where they were being discriminated against and weren't able to get the loans to be able to purchase a home or even refinance a home. And that wasn't even based on their ability to do so. So even if they could purchase a home or had the money to do that, because they were living in these redlined areas, they weren't allowed to even get the home loan, even if they could afford it. So what happened is in 1968, we had the Fair Housing Act come along, which said that you can't discriminate against anyone based on their race, religion, or national origin. And while that is a great stepping stone for us, it still did little to fix the problems that were apparent before. So the problems of redlining were not fixed. And so what you had was all of these white people who were in nice suburbs and not in the redlined areas that were able to start growing their wealth through home ownership. So you see those people have generational wealth, meaning family after family has wealth because they're growing it in real estate. And the black or people of color were not able to get those homes, and so they could not start growing that generational wealth at the same rate that the white people were. So while the Fair Housing Act was a great step, it didn't make up for everything that had happened in the past. And so we still do see a lot of systemic racism in real estate, because in the nicer neighborhoods where a lot of white people own, they also have nicer schools, because part of the property tax is going towards those schools. And so it just becomes this feedback loop of nice home, higher price, higher amount of money going to the schools, so the schools are nicer. And without black people or people of color being able to purchase those homes in the first place, they are already at a disadvantage from historical data, not being able to grow their wealth and then buy into those neighborhoods. So from what I've learned, really, racism has been apparent in real estate since the beginning of time, essentially, for the United States. And there's been little done to help make up for what was done in the past. So in this current state, it's really important not only just to be aware of this, but to also think about the impacts to everyone equally, and make sure, if you are purchasing a home, that you are not doing anything to perpetuate racism in real estate and how people are disadvantaged based on their color or their history or historical background from where they came from. So we all have to be aware of this. We all have to do everything we can going forward to correct that and make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity. And while the Fair Housing Act was a great step in the right direction, we need to do more to really make sure that those people who were disadvantaged before are now getting help and that disadvantage is being made up for. So that's a little bit of education about what's happened. If you have any thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. I myself still have learning to do, and I know that I don't know everything yet either. So we can all do this together and make sure that we're really aware of it and trying to take strides in the right direction for equality. So hopefully that helps give you a little background. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you have any more questions or want to share thoughts or brainstorm anything we can do, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.